Well, here we are back in the room. This is video part 3 of reading from the great works of Jewish fantasy, the story which we need to complete, but we got interrupted by Charlie Effluent. Epic Charlie Effluent. It's went all over me. I haven't got it all off me actually. I just see I've still got a bit of a yellow streak there to get that off because I don't want it to ruin my lovely dress. But anyway, that was a bit of a shock to the system. It was just so epic and wet so much. Oh, God is bless. Put a bit of detergent on it, might do the trick to help get that off. Yeah, poor Mama T. What a day. It's interesting, I had just recited the Psalm 102, the prayer of affliction, out of curiosity because it was mentioned in the story. Then I was afflicted with lots and lots of rainbow lorikeet poopykins, am I right? Oh well, you know, you can't be mad at a bird that has no concept of what's actually going on here. Sometimes I don't know what's going on either. Sometimes you just got to step outside and take a deep breath and scream, "What's going on?" But anyway, I'll tell you what's going on. We're going to carry on, keep reading. So I've got to have a bit of a laugh about it actually. How am I going to read when this book is so damned wet now? And where were we up to? That's right. It was positive that Jews were born by a great mercy. But what about his own wound, which had never closed? When had God shown mercy to him, to Rabbi Simon Bar-Bon? I'm all wet now. The rabbi sighed amid the great joy of the tiding that everything would turn out well for the Jews of, Frankfurt. He drove away the gloomy thoughts about his own fate, and he spoke the evening prayers with great fervour. There's still a tiny, tiny bit of rainbow lorikeet shit still caught in the crease, which I can't get out unless I soak the whole book in water. So I guess that's going to be an interesting, I'll try and scrape it out with a pen maybe, an interesting memory of Charlie forever after, am I right? I'll use her feather because light cures light, babies. I got it out. But anyway, you kind of have to giggle about that. It's just astonishing. Right, here we go. I carefully turn the page because the next 3 or 4 pages are sopping wet now. Chapter 20. Jews in pointed Jewish hats walk through papal Rome. We were forced to wear weird hats in the Middle Ages to show that we were Jews. In the Holocaust, we were forced to wear a yellow star. Before long, Solomon ibn Ita came to Rabbi Simon Bar-Bon and told him to prepare for the papal audience. The Pope was ready to receive the Jewish delegation from Frankfurt on the Main. The day before the audience, the Frankfurt Jews fasted and recited the proper prayers. Only the 3 elders of Frankfurt, with Rabbi Simon Bar-Bon at their head, went to the Vatican. The elder of Rome, Solomon ibn Ita, accompanied them to the gates of the Vatican. There he was supposed to turn them over to a priest who would take them to the Pope. He would then have to wait outside until they came back safe and sound from the Holy See. They travelled the entire distance on foot, in silence. Solomon Ibn Eta led them through many streets and squares. There were churches everywhere, palaces, statues. On the squares they saw large and extraordinary fountains of white, red and black marble. The fountains were populated with a plethora of fantastic stone figures and masks. Some of the figures had human heads, but the bodies of rearing horses or wild buffalo. Columns of water splashed aloft in all kinds of shapes. It looked like a thicket of water. My neighbour across the road, they've got their house up for auction again. So there's a lot of cars coming and going, I think, to look at the house before the auction. It's making me nervous seeing all this activity going past. Sorry, it looked like a thicket of water. And all the stone creatures and masks had water. Ugh, some more shit there. Oh, by the gods. Well, shit will keep happening, won't it? It's just a fact of life when you have a rainbow lorikeet. Got to be prosaic about it. Where were we? Oh, and all the stone creatures and masks had water gushing and pouring out of their faces as though they were yelling and roaring with watery voices. Ooh, it's a very windy day. My banana tree's almost bent over in half. Ah, well. The pale Jews in the pointed Jewish hats looked like terrified strangers in the world of palaces, churches and marble fountains, a world in which even the stones were laughing and enjoying themselves with a lusty and rutting pleasure. They arrived at the shore of that stretch of the Tiber which separates the Vatican from the city of Rome. Here, Solomon Ibn Eta lifted his finger and pointed at a round grey tower. The black maws of cannon were glaring down from it. Guards holding halberds were striding up and down. That is the tomb of Adrian the Evil, said Solomon Ibn Eta. The heads of the pointed Jewish hats turned up, gazed at the round tower of the tomb of Adrian the Evil. Chapter 21. My poor book. I'm sorry, book. I didn't plan on that happening. It's just one of those things. At the Holy See. They soon arrived at St. Peter's Square in front of the Vatican. It was flooded with sunlight. Rabbi Simon Bar-Bun trembled. Years and years ago, he had seen this very square in the second part of his dream. Solomon Ibn Eta led them through long rows of columns and pillars. They came to a small gate. In front of it stood a guard of papal Lansquenets, which I derived the meaning as German mercenaries. They wore yellow velvet and were holding halberds. Solomon Ibn Eta called out the name of a cardinal. One of the Lansquenets vanished behind the gate. He came back shortly, accompanied by a wan, plain priest in a black cassock. The priest did not greet the Jews. He was rigid. He pointed a finger at the Frankfurt delegation. Rabbi Simon Bar-Bun and the three elders of Frankfurt went off with the priest. He took them along stairways and dark, and light corridors, through rooms that were covered with paintings by the greatest masters. Each room was like a different world. Some of the rooms were rich and prosperous, like the dwellings of the most powerful kings on earth, and some were dark and bare, like the Christian afterlife. Candles were burning in high candelabras of gold and marble, and all sorts of oil lamps were burning over wooden and golden crosses, lighting up the faces of all kinds of Jesuses. At last, the priest stiffly opened a door. It was a middling room with bare white walls. An oil lamp was burning over a large black crucifix. Near a table that was plated with copper sat the Pope. The Pope was dressed in white. Everything on him was white. He wore a white stole on his shoulders and a white skull cap on his head. However, on his feet he wore scarlet slippers, and on the slippers 2 golden keys were embroidered. The 4 Jews bowed deep. The Pope lifted his head, gazed at the delegation from Frankfurt. He stared at Simon Bar-Bon for a long time. At length, he softly asked in Latin, "What do you wish?" Simon Bar-Bon was holding the letter from the electoral bishop of Frankfurt on the Main. With his head lowered, he approached the white figure on the chair, handed him the letter. The Pope tore open the seal and began reading. He read for a long time, smiled, kept raising his eyes, looked at the Frankfurt Jews, and most of all at Simon Bar-Bon. Finally, he folded the letter and said, "Rabbi Simon Bar-Bon, the electoral bishop, writes that you are one of the greatest scholars among Jews and also an extraordinary chess player." Simon Bar-Bon lowered his head. "A chess player," the Pope repeated. "I love to play chess, and I would very much like to challenge you on the chessboard." Suddenly, the Pope turned to the Frankfurt Jews and said impatiently, "You shall receive an answer tomorrow about the expulsion from Frankfurt. You may go and wait in one of the rooms outside, but meanwhile your Rabbi Simon Bar-Bon will remain with me. I want to play a round of chess with him." Chapter 22. Joseph in Egypt. And so it came as the Pope desired. He remained alone with Rabbi Simon. The priest in the black cassock brought in a chess set of old ivory. The figures had the faces of knights and Lansquenet. Dear Goddess. The king and queen were masterpieces of carving. The Pope asked Rabbi Simon to sit down with him at the table, and then he made the first move. Rabbi Simon responded with a move on his part. He forgot who was sitting across from him and became absorbed in the course of battle. Don't speak Spanish to me, spirits. I don't speak Spanish. I don't even know what they're trying to say. It's not appropriate. You're interrupting my reading. It's already been interrupted by Poopykins. Please go back into the light. Thank you. My goodness, they're really active today. Really active. Where was I? You've thrown me off my perch. I don't even know where I was at now. It's rude. The Pope asked Rabbi Simon, we'll have to start from there. The Pope asked Rabbi Simon to sit down with him at the table, and then he made the first move. Rabbi Simon responded with a move on his part. He forgot who was sitting across from him and became absorbed in the course of battle. He even held his beard suavely, softly hummed a Sabbath hymn. Sweet. The movements of the figures became more and more intricate. Suddenly the Pope made a move. Rabbi Simon Bar-Bun trembled. His hand hung motionless over the chessboard. "Why aren't you moving, Rabbi Simon?" asked the Pope, seeming nonchalant. "That last move, Your Holiness," Rabbi Simon spoke faintly, "was very surprising. It's a move unknown to any chess player in the world. The only place you'll find it is in an ancient Hebrew manuscript in my home." "You've never shown it to anyone, Rabbi Simon?" asked the Pope. Rabbi Simon let out a deep sigh. "I only revealed it to one person in the world." Simon had tears in his eyes. "That person is no longer among the living. Many, many years have flown by. The wound will not stop bleeding. Joseph has been torn to shreds," he said almost to himself in Hebrew. Involuntarily, he withdrew his hand from the chessboard, remained sitting with a drooping head before the Pope. For a while, there was a hush. "Joseph has been torn to shreds," the Pope suddenly said in Hebrew. Rabbi Simon shuddered. "The world is wondrous in its distances and its occurrences," the Pope went on in a pure classical Latin. "Perhaps he'll come back to you, your lost son, Joseph." Rabbi Simon began to weep. The Pope abruptly got up from his throne. He fell upon Rabbi Simon's neck and burst into sobs. "I am your son, Joseph," he said in a choked voice. The call of blood resounded in the old Jew, and he instantly recognized Joseph. He wanted to raise his eyes to heaven and cry out his utter joy, but he gazed at the white Pope and the black crucifix hanging on his throat, and the Father's lips closed. Joseph was a renegade. The call of paternal blood was drowned by the voice of the ancient people of Israel. A voice pronouncing all the temptations and that wondrous stubbornness that is Jewish history in the world. "Joseph is a renegade," he said to himself. "He has deserted the old tents of Jacob." Rabbi Simon kept his eyes closed. His lips were as pale as death and locked as if with 1,000 locks. Involuntarily, he could only feel them inaudibly whispering the 102nd Psalm, the prayer of the afflicted man when he is overwhelmed. The second dream has come true, he thought. Will the third one come true as well? The chess game on the table stood like a silent observer amid the great battle. The Pope stood next to the broken Jew and lovingly stroked his hair. It's like losing your son twice. A terrible tragedy. Chapter 23. Joseph tells his story. Simon Bar-Bun sat there with his head bowed low. Next to him stood the Pope, quietly speaking a plain Yiddish that Jews spoke in the ghetto of Frankfurt on the Main. Holding his eyes shut, the rabbi felt as if distant years were present occurrences. He could hear their voices, with his eyes. It was a hot, putrid day, and I went to bathe. Rabbi Simon Bar-Bun heard Joseph's voice. You sent a servant to accompany me. I didn't know my way around the edge of the city. The servant took me into a narrow street between two grey churches, which were both closed. He went up to a small door, yanked a rope. The door opened. Out came a nun's head. It took only a second. Several powerful hands dragged me inside the church. The door slammed shut behind me. I was surrounded by a strange silence. There was no one in sight. I looked around. I was in a small rectangular courtyard which was lined with columns. In the middle of the courtyard there was a stone well with a chain hanging from it. There were several pigeons perched on the lip of the well. I sat down next to the well and began weeping. I wept and wept until at last I fell asleep. When I awoke, I found myself in a small monastic cell. The walls were white and bare. The only furnishings were a hard bed, a wooden table, and a hard bench. The only lifelike thing in the cell was the crucified figure on the black cross. They soon brought me some food and drink. I didn't want to eat any forbidden food, and so I lived on bread and water. Meaning by that they were probably trying to feed him pork or shellfish or some other unkosher meats or foods. I was afraid to lie on the bed. The blanket might be a mixture of linen and wool. I slept on the cold stone floor of the cell. Gradually they began talking to me. They praised my great abilities. They said it was too bad that I would have to squander them among Jews. I could someday become world famous. What could I become among Jews? A junk dealer with a pointed Jewish hat, or possibly a rabbi. The words slowly fell on me like drops of water on a stone. My ears began to open to the glory of this world and also to my Jewish abjectness. I had a choice to make. I slowly began to waver. What were Jews? An everlasting darkness, an everlasting game with temptations. What would become of this bloody Jewish game? Who can say? Here, a free and radiant morning was beckoning to me from the window of the monastery. I saw 2 ladders before me. One ladder led to honour, glory, a power to which all nations bow and are subject like a flock of lambs. The second ladder, it also led somewhere. The Jews of Frankfurt were climbing it. The shabby, tattered Jews with sacks of junk on their shoulders and with pointed Jewish hats on their heads. And the nations of the world were also standing under that second ladder, which the Jews were climbing. But they weren't like lambs. They were like wild lions and leopards screaming for blood, ready to tear their victims apart. I slowly began to delve into the Christian books, to listen to the conversations of the priests. My ears opened. Gradually I forgot the ghetto of Frankfurt and its darknesses. I started out on the path of success and worldly power. Fortune carried me on its wings. I rapidly climbed higher and higher. Now I sit on the throne of the highest power in the world. The nations bow before me. Chapter 24. Rabbi Simon's lips are sealed with 1,000 locks. Rabbi Simon Bar Bun was still sitting there with a lowered head and closed eyes. His heart was being torn to bits in a storm of contradictory feelings. He wanted to reach out his arms and fling them around Joseph, burst into tears and forgive him for everything. A human being is just a weak creature, he thought. The Lord is a gracious and compassionate God. But then everything within him shouted, "Run, Simon! What is a Jew without temptations? A mote of dust in the winds. How comely are thy tents, O Jacob! A Jew who cannot bow his head and wait in the darknesses. He is a tree that shall not flourish on the last day of the world. The day of doom and justice." This is where I get my innate defiance from, by the way, that I'm kind of infamous for. Your Joseph is a renegade. Stop up your ears, Simon, like the Jews you saw in the Roman ghetto. What is a Jew without great trials? Exhausted, that's what she is. Very, very exhausted. Maybe one day exalted, but you never know what my fate might be one day. Hopefully peaceful and in love with a man in love with me also. It's a psychedelic dreamer's manifestation. I've been doing it for 59 years and 5 months, almost 6 months. Might as well keep on doing it. He felt Joseph's hands upon him. They were lovingly stroking his hair. He shut his eyes tighter and lowered his head deeper and deeper. Simon Bar Bun's lips were sealed with 1,000 locks. After long inward struggles and torments, he barely managed to ask, almost at random, what will happen with the Jews in Frankfurt on the Main? Not a hair on their heads shall be touched. The whole edict was merely a trick to make you come to Rome and talk to me." A broken man with his eyes shut, Rabbi Simon Bar-Bun got up from the chair. His hands trembling, he groped the air like a blind man. He himself didn't know whether his arms were seeking his Joseph or the door through which he could escape from his inner tortures and once again forget everything. The Pope stopped speaking. Rabbi Simon felt someone gently leading him from the room. The door closed softly behind him. When Simon Bar-Bun opened his eyes, he saw the 3 elders of Frankfurt before him. Because of the rabbi's pallor, the Jews thought he had not succeeded in getting the Pope to rescind the decree. They too turned deathly pale, and their eyes filled with tears. "Everything is all right. The Lord be praised. The decree has been revoked," said Rabbi Simon Bar-Bun with feigned self-assurance. The Jews asked no other questions. Silently they left the Vatican. Outside, Solomon Ibn Eter was waiting for them. The 5 Jews walked back to the ghetto. Chapter 25. Rejoicing in the Jewish communities. I must show you before I finish this video. If I finish the story, will I finish the story today? Yes, my Brindabella raspberry tiger rose. Before the 5 Jews even reached the ghetto on foot, a special papal messenger had galloped to the Roman Rabbi Samson Frascati and handed him a sealed document from the papal chancellery declaring the expulsion of the Jews from Frankfurt on the Main null and void. The glad tidings quickly spread through the ghetto. One can imagine the rejoicing. When the 5 Jews walked through the gates of the ghetto, Jews were standing near the white closed church, raising their arms to herald the good news. Simon Bar-Bun joined in with the rejoicing of the Jews, but in his heart the storm was still raging. The next day, the Frankfurt delegation started back home. The Roman Jews took a fond farewell of them and wished them all the luck in the world. The same rejoicing prevailed in all the ghettos through which the delegation passed, and thus they gradually made their way back to Frankfurt on the Main. Chapter 26. In a stormy night. In the Jewish darknesses of Frankfurt on the Main, the Jews went back to their old clothes and money lending. Rabbi Simon Bar-Bun withheld more and more into seclusion. The Jews were surprised that he also gave up the one worldly delight he had enjoyed, chess. He no longer wanted to sit down at the chessboard with anyone. They could see the lamp burning in his library all through the night. People wondered when he slept. On very quiet nights, they could even hear him murmuring like a mournful dove. It was said that he was absorbed in the Kabbalah and was preparing to leave Frankfurt and go to Safed in the Holy Land, to reach out and pray on the to stretch out and pray. Maybe I need to do that. Rid myself of the book that precludes me from true love. How would I get the money to go to Sfard though? It's a psychedelic dreamer's dream. To stretch out and pray on the sacred tombs and wait for the last day of his life among the great Kabbalists of Sfard. And then, one stormy night, Rabbi Simon Bar-Bun was sitting on the ground with ashes on his head, reciting the midnight prayers in memory of the destruction of Jerusalem and for the restoration of Israel. All at once, a violent gale swept up outside. Thunder boomed fearfully. The darknesses were shredded by sharp, penetrating lightning. The storm grew worse from minute to minute. Peals of thunder, bolts of lightning, wild gales roared through the night. Every so often, a crack of lightning would illuminate Simon Bar-Bun's window as though someone were peering through it. Then a torrent came down. I will go with you, they say. That's nice. I need money for that, not nonsensical fantasies like I'm reading now. By the gods, Mama always living in some kind of hellscape or dreamscape, am I right? When she gets close to manifesting reality, something always tears it away from me. Why is that? I don't know. Rabbi Simon Bar-Bun silently kept his eyes shut and wept over. But they say, but little one, you're awake now. Yes, I know. Little one's been awake for a long time now. And still I am denied and held back from all the things I most yearned for in life. It is what it is. I missed out on dancing last night. I was too exhausted and it's too bitterly cold, but I need to dance. That's how I pray these days. I need to dance. Maybe I'll dance for Burst tonight. I'll see how I feel later in the night because they start earlier on a Saturday at 10, but they go until 2. And it'll depend on if I'm too tired whether I go or not. Rabbi Simon Bar-Bun silently kept his eyes shut and wept over the destruction of Jerusalem. In the midst of the storm, he heard a knocking at his door. Probably a poor wayfarer looking for shelter in this deluge, thought Simon Bar-Bun to himself. He stood up from the morning chair and went to open the door. A strange vagabond in rags and tatters was standing at the threshold, a sack on his shoulders. Thunder crashed. A jagged flash of lightning lit up the darkness and the face of the strange vagabond. Rabbi Simon Bar-Bun shuddered. In the sharply illuminated storm, he saw, standing before him, his own son, Joseph. Simon Bar-Bun put his finger to his lips. He took his son Joseph's hand, made him sit down next to him on the floor. The storm outside grew stronger. The darknesses were shredded by bright, jagged lightning. Rabbi Simon Bar-Bun spoke the 102nd Psalm, the prayer of the afflicted man, as he stroked the head of the strange vagabond, his prodigal son, Joseph. And in Chabad, in Hasidic Judaism, a Jew who returns to the fold after a long period of absence, aka possibly could happen that I choose to do that one day, but not inclined to, not while I live in Brisbane. I will never trust them again. But, well, famous last words. My heart might no longer crunch like broken concrete. But anyway, a person who returns to, the Jewish fold after sometimes a long period of absence is called a Baal Teshuvah, or son of repentance. I'm not sure what the female version is, but anyway. I don't know if I'll ever return though. I mean, in my heart and my soul, I'm still a Jew, but I enjoy my wild, witchy, shamanic ways, and I've fought hard to maintain those too. Trust me on that. Did my apprenticeship of pain at the Treasury Casino, being vilified and demonised for probably just for being a Jew, being out on Saturday, Friday nights. So the sin is only on the Friday night though, because that is the Shabbat, the night of rest, the herald of the day of rest. There's no sin if I dance on Saturday nights. I can do that without any feelings of guilt at all, but anyway, I dance my dance as a defiance and a rebellion and a triumph over all my oppressors, Jewish and non-Jewish, in my entire life. And it's wild, and it's joyous, and it's powerful, and it's magical. It's kept me alive all these long years. There were many times when I didn't think I would make it. It exhausts me at times. I get psychic vermin trying to attach to me, like Lachlan last Friday with his women in tow. That was fucking creepy. Or like those two young girls on the night of the 12th of July wanting to attack me. They have no idea who they're dealing with. I overcome each and every time. Mind you, I wasn't alone. I had supernatural assistance that night. It was supernatural what I did. Powerful and kind of beautiful too. People were amazed, and I'm like, why are you amazed? I've resorted to violence like any common street fighting animal. But sometimes violence is the only language certain types, demonic-ridden hell imps, understand. You have to resort to it, unfortunately. Anyway, thus concludes that very interesting and powerful story by Jenna Velt. We've got time, I think, for another short one. Let me find a short one. There was one I wanted to read yesterday, but I got sidetracked. I'm feeling a bit dizzy today, which means I'm exhausted, overly exhausted. So we'll do one more short one, and then I'm going to rest on the Holy Shabbat for the rest of the day. Watch TV. And then tonight, I can't watch TV. I've got no fucking TV now. Smallest violin. I'll watch Netflix on my iPhone. There's always a way around things, babies. And I wonder if I can bring it up on my laptop. Then I get a slightly bigger screen. Yes, I might try that. But anyway, I shall rest and recuperate. And by 8 o'clock, 7 or 8 o'clock, I'll decide if I'm going to do my wild witchy dance, which I kind of really miss if I skip a weekend, I go into depressions. Last time I was really messed up. It was odd. I hadn't realised how much it recalibrates my spirit for the rest of the week. Well, here's one. It's like, let's see how long this one is. It's only a few pages long. All right, let's do this, babies. The rabbi who was turned into a werewolf. Never heard of that before, have you? Well, now we're about to find out, babies. I guess I've met a few rabbis that were not quite human in my day. Rabbi Brown in Wellington comes to mind. He was a bit of a fucking bastard. Oh, he was nasty to me. His wife took pity on me, actually, drove me back to the university and said, don't convert through my husband. He dishonoured you. Convert through the reform movement. She correctly identified that I was way too much of a wild woman and a feminist, even as a 17-year-old, to sell myself out into ultra Chabad Judaism. Would never have worked. Would have been a miscarriage of justice and of marriage, because my soul, although Jewish, craves beyond all things, even more than true love, which you hear me calling for every day, craves freedom. Freedom. Always freedom, people of earth. In the context of remaining a good, kind and reasonable person, and allowing for the freedom of others also. It's very important as an anarchist and a revolutionary and a wild woman to maintain the wild, babies. Maybe I'm part werewolf too. I mean, hello, my Viking ancestors, with my wild wolf talk. Maybe one day I'll become a werewolf. Delicious, nutritious, tastes just like chicken, am I right? Well, we will do no such thing. I'll remain a human woman and live my best life and love as much as I love, powerfully and sometimes almost to the point of insanity, and be joyous and be free. One day I'll find a man who loves me in the same way, with great honour and respect and care for me, who will join with me and wholeheartedly, with every fibre of his being, choosing me by day and by night as I will choose him. Has to be a two-way reciprocated thing. It's the way it has to be, babies. To that one who I may never meet, but let's live the psychedelic dream a dream. It's what I excel at, actually. It's why I still live in poverty and housing commission, divested of all my wealth, and potentiates. It's evil. It's truly evil, but it's what the gods decreed for me. Here we go. The rabbi who was turned into a werewolf. This story really happened. Once there was a rabbi, a man of distinction, who lived in the land of Uz. I don't know where Uz is. Was there such a land? Maybe I should Google it later. He was very rich. It's unusual for a rabbi too. And he knew all the 70 languages. What? Only 70? I suppose 70 is 69 more than I know fluently. Although I have smatterings of French and Spanish and German and little tiny bits of Dutch and Maori, but it is what it is, people. You have to laugh. The rabbi kept a great yeshiva which was attended by many fine students. He also paid for the education of a number of boys. All in all, there was some 100 young men in the yeshiva. A yeshiva's kind of the equivalent of college or university in our Jewish religious, communities. It's a very high level of education. It's where rabbis are trained and they're taught Hebrew and Aramaic and Talmud and Kabbalah at times and all sorts of things. Jewish law, and it's a great honour to attend a yeshiva. He also supported an organisation for the poor, and there were many paupers who frequented his home. In a word, the rabbi was a pious Jew with all the virtues befitting a Jew. His wife, however, was a wicked woman who looked askance at his good deeds. She couldn't bear the presence of any poor people in her house. Yes, I knew women like that in my community. Scorned me for being poor and scorned me for having a German mother and scorned me for being a trauma survivor and scorned me for being a survivor of child sexual abuse. Told me that drug addicts and alcoholics deserve to be raped. Oh, they were the truly evil ones. And yet they judge me for rebelliously dancing my dance every Friday night. Am I right? The irony. Don't ever fuck with the Tanya, by the way. My rage almost equals my capacity to love at times, but I tamp it down like I tamp down my love at times. By the gods. Well, I'm only human after all, with a little bit of supra tacked onto that. Have you noticed, those of you who know me well, that I've changed slightly again? I've been altered slightly again since that last near death on the night of the 10th of the 11th of July. That energy that sat beside me and got me breathing again, I don't know who or what that was, but I've changed yet again. And I'm finding it a little bit freaky actually, because not in a bad way. I haven't done anything bad or shameful, but it's like it sits beside me and guides me along, and I've been really open spiritually, hearing spirits communicating even during this video. It's a bit astonishing, people of Earth. I don't know whether I should be frightened or grateful or go and have an exorcism or what, but you know what? I know I'm not a bad person yet, because I'm still holding my line and still dancing my dance, and I'm still loving the Holy One and all manifestations and loving the ones who love me back. So I won't worry too much. I will choose to be grateful. Gratitude is always a good thing, even amongst the multiverses. How does the proverb go? When the rope is too taut, it snaps. And that was what happened with our pious rabbi. He lost all his wealth. I know how that feels, baby. Now he could no longer help the poor, the students, and the little boys. He thought to himself, "Oh God, what should I do? I've devoted all my life to charity for the sake of the Lord. But now, sinful creature that I am, I've become a pauper." Talk about victim blaming one's own self. Jesus, Well, not Jesus, but you know what I mean. What can a man do? I'll bear this without protest from God's hand, for everything he does is righteous. Who knows, perhaps I committed some sin. No, he was merely the victim of the evil eye from his own wife, and I know how that goes, because I went through that too. My own husband and my own mother, my worst enemies on this God's earth. The damage they wreaked lasted decades. And then some, all their flying monkeys. And then some, and on it went and on it went. I had to let it all go, which is my version of forgiveness. But, you know, here I am, reading stories. It's beautiful, it's poignant, it's potent, it's powerful, it's perfectly imperfect. And he mused, well, what's the use of complaining? There are people who gloat over other people's misfortunes. I'll do something about it. I'll leave town secretly so that no one will know what's become of me. Temptation to leave town. All you do is take your problems with you, beloved Rabbi. Books find you everywhere. Remember that. You can't shuck it off. You can't. Just have to live through it. Get older and wiser and more courageous and determined and more loving, and find peace in your own heart and soul, even in strange spaces amongst strange people. 'Tis what it is. The spirits scream out, Corazon, yes, my beloved ones, my amores, yes, Corazon. He called together his fine students in the yeshiva and said, Dear students, you know how devoted I've been to you all this time. I've provided you with food and clothing and studied with you. But now I have to tell you a secret, and I hope that you will do toward me as I have always done toward you. The students answered together, Dear Rabbi, tell us your secret, and we promise that we will be true to you as long as God gives us life. The rabbi told them he had to leave town. He couldn't understand why he'd become a pauper, and he asked them to come away with him. I still have a few ducats in my pocket, and we can live on them together. Who can tell? Perhaps one day the good Lord will make me rich again, and then you can board with me for the rest of your lives. Oh, what a sweet, loving heart he has. He's a sweetheart, isn't he? The students answered, Dear Rabbi, we will gladly do everything you ask of us, and whatever we own, whether money or clothes, we will share with you. And so the rabbi went away with 50 of his yeshiva students, and no one in the community knew about it. When the poor people found that the rabbi was gone, they were deeply frightened, just like the boys he had raised at his own expense and the other students who remained in the house with his wife. But the rabbi was off with his students, and because he was famous, he was greatly honoured wherever he went, as befits such a great man. No one was surprised that he had left home. People assumed that he and his students were travelling to a yeshiva to study the Torah. After they roamed for about a year or two, Their clothes became tattered and they ran out of money. Now they had to go begging, and there were 50 of them. Wherever they came, people shut the doors in their faces and refused to let them in. No one could tell whether they were yeshiva students or ne'er-do-wells. At last, they became tired of their life of wandering, and they said to the rabbi, "Dear Rabbi, what's going to become of us? How much longer can we roam like this? We have no money and no clothes. There's nothing we can do about it. Wherever we come, people close their doors and take us for ne'er-do-wells. Perhaps we ought to go home to our parents. We're growing older. We want to get married, but we won't tell anyone what you're doing or where you are." Upon hearing this from his students, the good rabbi pondered for a while, and then he said, "My dear students, what greater praise can I speak of you than your loyalty, which you have been showing me all this time? I therefore want to ask you, stay with me another 4 or 5 days until after Shabbat. Then, with God's help, I will let you go. Perhaps the good Lord will grant us some luck and we'll be able to go home together." The students answered, "Fine, dear Rabbi. We've been with you so long, we'll stay together for a few more days." And so they wandered on until they came to a clump of saplings. Here the rabbi said to his students, "Go on ahead, I have to relieve myself." The students walked on, discussing and disputing. After relieving himself, the rabbi wanted to wash his hands. He caught sight of a spring not too far away. He took some water and washed his hands. Just as he was about to go farther, he sighted a little weasel dashing past, with a lovely golden ring in its mouth. The rabbi began to chase the weasel until the beast dropped the ring. The rabbi picked it up. He saw it was worthless, but then he noticed an ancient writing on the inside, which he was able to read. It said, "Though I look ugly, I am invaluable." The rabbi was very wise, and he realized there was something special about this ring, and he pondered and pondered. What kind of virtue does the ring have? What makes it so invaluable? Perhaps it has the magic power to grant any wish that a man might desire. I'll try it. And he wished, "May God let me find a money belt before me." Scarcely had he uttered his wish when he saw lying before him a belt full of gold. He was overjoyed again, and upon returning to his students, he said, "Dear students, you can make merry. We will soon arrive in a place where a friend of mine lives. He is a wealthy man, and I'm sure he will lend me money. He doesn't yet realize that I'm poor." With the money, I'll be able to buy you all new clothes and send you home. He didn't want to tell his students about the ring. He feared they might take it away or else report him, and he would lose it. So he didn't say a word. He wasn't completely stupid then, was he? When the students heard they would soon be getting new clothes, they were overjoyed, and they asked no further questions. They believed everything he told them, and so they arrived in the next town. On the very first day, the rabbi began dressing his students in the finest velvet and silk. Oh, I love velvet and silk too, my favourite things. And he bought himself the same kind of clothing he had worn before. He remained in this town for a week or 10 days, studying hard with his students. The citizens paid him a good deal of respect, as was proper, for he was a great Torah scholar and very learned. He went into the city and bought a beautiful coach fit for a prince. And he told his students, "Dear students, come here, and I will pay you back for everything you did for me while we were roaming about. And then we shall go home." And the students merely thought that the wealthy relative in the town had lent him 1,000 ducats, just as the rabbi said to them, so that he might return home in honour. And they started back, and the people who had once closed their doors to them now opened them wide and welcomed the travellers warmly. It's amazing what having money can do for a soul. However, while the rabbi and his students were away from their hometown, the people were miserable. But then they found out that the rabbi and his students were coming back, and there were shouts of joy. And who was as glad as the poor people in town? When the rabbi arrived, everyone gave him a warm welcome, for nobody realized he had gone out into the world because he had been poverty-stricken. People thought he had gone away to study, and the rabbi acted as he had always acted before. He gave charity, opened his yeshiva, and brought up little boys to study. On Shabbat, Sabbath afternoons, following his nap, he would interpret the hard, critical glosses of the Talmud for his students. One Saturday afternoon, he went to sleep with his wife. Some time later, his wife started nagging him. "Dear husband, how come you have so much money all at once? We were so poor earlier that you left town." Her husband answered, "The good Lord sent me some luck during my travels." But his wife didn't believe him. She kept tormenting him, as women do, until he gave in and told her the secret. That was very foolish of him. King Solomon once warned that a man should never tell a secret to his wife, for she will betray him. This happened to the good rabbi, as you shall hear. If the rabbi had refused to tell her the secret, he would have spared himself a lot of trouble. But because he told the secret of the ring, which made all wishes come true, he soon had to suffer terribly. The moment that shrew of a Rebbetzin heard about the ring, she thought to himself, a Rebbetzin is the proper term for a rabbi's wife in Yiddish. She thought to herself, if only I can get the ring out of him, he'll never see it again. She was simply dying to get the ring, but she knew she couldn't get it without his consent. So she said to him, "Dear husband, give me the ring for a while. I want to see it." But the rabbi knew how wicked she was, and he wouldn't let her have the ring. So she started yelling and said, "I can see you don't love me anymore. Otherwise you wouldn't be afraid to trust me with the ring." She put a flea in his ear until he had to give her the ring. The moment she had it, she stuck her head under the cover and said, "I wish that God would turn my husband into a werewolf and let him run around in the forest with the wild beasts." Scarcely had she uttered her wish when the good rabbi leapt out of the window and dashed off into the deep forest, the Bohemian woods, which I believe are in Czechoslovakia, maybe partly south of Germany too, maybe parts of Hungary too. Here he started devouring people in the forest. He caused so much havoc that it was worth your life walking through the forest. Everyone was scared of the werewolf. He built himself a dry den to live in, and he caused so much terror that the charcoal burners all ran away from the forest because they were frightened of him. But now we'll leave the wolf for a time and write about what was happening in his home with the students. When the time came that Shabbat afternoon for the rabbi to do his lesson with the students, his wife, damn her soul, said to them, "The rabbi won't be able to give his lesson today because he doesn't feel well." The students believed her and went back home. The next day they came for their lesson again, and the wife said, "The rabbi has gone travelling again, but he didn't tell me where he was going. But I think that when 4 years are up, he'll return." She made believe she was very sorrowful. But in reality, damn her soul, she was very glad. Now, when poor people came, she wouldn't let them in the house. This was a dreadful time for the poor, and they were very miserable because of the rabbi's absence. The wicked shrew grew rich, as we can well imagine. She got herself everything she desired, and there was no end to her wealth. But no one could understand what had become of the rabbi and where they had simply vanished to, nor could anyone find out. People only hoped that he would finally come home, as he had already done once before. But now we'll leave the shrew for a while and describe the condition of the poor rabbi who was running around in the shape of a wolf. He caused terrible suffering and tore apart people and other animals, for there is no animal stronger than the werewolf. The town sent for the charcoal burners and asked them whether they would be willing to go after the werewolf and destroy him. The charcoal burners refused, saying the werewolf was stronger than a lion and as smart as a human being. Hearing this, the king went hunting for the werewolf in the forest, but he couldn't catch him. They dug pits in the forest, but nothing helped. However, there lived a charcoal burner in the woods whom the werewolf never bothered. On the contrary, he became friendly with him and always hung around his hut, although other men had to keep clear of the forest because they were so frightened of him. One day the king issued a proclamation that whoever would overcome the wolf and capture him, dead or alive, would marry the king's daughter and inherit the kingdom. I wonder what the king's daughter thought of all this. Did she have a say in this? I think not. The king had an advisor who was unmarried. He was very strong and heroic and had displayed his might in tournaments. This advisor said to the king, "Your Majesty, if you intend to keep your word, then I will undertake to kill the wolf. You know that I have fought in a lot of wars and shown a great deal of strength and always carried the day in my fights, and now I want to try my luck again." The king promised he would keep his word. The advisor took his weapons and armed himself well, for he was convinced he would kill the wolf. First, he went to the charcoal burner, who was friendly with the wolf, and said to him, "My friend, show me where the wolf's den is, or where he hangs about." When the charcoal burner saw that the royal adviser was intent on killing the wolf, he was deeply alarmed, for he was fearful for the adviser's life, since he himself had almost been killed by the werewolf. So the charcoal burner said to the adviser, "My lord, what are you doing here in this forest? When the wolf sees you, you will be doomed, no matter how great you are." The adviser said, "Never mind, just show me where he is. I came here to try and kill the wolf." The charcoal burner said, "My lord, I beg you, do not go on, or you will be doomed." The adviser said, "Don't hold me up. This is what has to be." So the charcoal burner said, "Then God have mercy on your soul." And he led the adviser to the place where the wolf was running about. With his musket and spear in his hands, the adviser slowly crept up toward the werewolf, thinking he would kill him as soon as he saw him up close. But when the wolf saw that his life was in danger, he leapt to the side and sprang upon the adviser's throat. He flung him upon the earth and was about to kill him. When the charcoal burner saw what was happening, he chased the wolf away from the adviser, but the adviser wouldn't stop. He still wanted to kill the wolf. The charcoal burner wouldn't allow it. When the adviser tried to attack the wolf a third time, the wolf became so fierce that he wanted to tear him to shreds. The adviser pleaded with God to save him from the wolf. He swore he wouldn't go after him any more. The wolf let go and began wagging his tail, quite humanly, the way one man tries to flatter another. He wouldn't stay away from him, and he trotted after him the way a loyal dog trots with his master. The adviser wanted to get rid of him, for he was terribly frightened, but the wolf kept running after him. The adviser took his belt off and used it as a leash for the wolf. In this way, the wolf became his steady companion in the woods, and whenever a wild beast appeared that might harm the adviser, the wolf would kill it. If he saw a hare or fox running by, he would catch it and bring it back to the adviser. Finally, the adviser led the wolf back to the king in town, and the king and his advisers were terror-stricken. They'd heard enough rumours about how the wolf had torn people to shreds. The king asked the adviser to get rid of the wolf, but the adviser said, "Your Majesty, don't be afraid. He won't harm anyone if nobody bothers him. I'll put my head on the block for that. Why, he's even caught various animals for me." And so the adviser kept the wolf at his side and did a lot of good things for him. He told everyone that the wolf had taken pity on the adviser and allowed him to live, even though he certainly deserved to be torn to shreds, because he had tried to kill the wolf 3 times. That was why the adviser was now treating the wolf so well, giving him food and drink, the very best and not the very worst. Whenever the adviser went hunting, he always took the wolf along, and when the wolf sighted an animal, he caught it and brought it back to his master. As we already know, The king had promised to let his daughter marry the man who captured the wolf, dead or alive. Now the adviser certainly deserved her hand. The king did indeed keep his word and gave him his daughter for a wife, as well as half his wealth. And when the old king died after a time, the adviser took his place and ruled over the entire land. He always kept the wolf at his side and was unwilling to part from him as long as he lived. This was because the wolf had saved his life and helped him become king, and thus he took care of him, for it was only just. One winter's day, when it was snowing heavily, the young king went out hunting, and he took along the wolf. As soon as the wolf was outside, he began wagging his tail and kept running on ahead as though he were tracking down something. The king rode after him and saw him from afar, grubbing in the snow with his paw. When the king arrived, he saw some words hidden in the snow. The king was astounded and said, "There's something wondrous here, a wolf that can write. Perhaps he's really a human being under a curse. Such things have happened in the past." But no one could read the writing, so the king sent for scholars, but none could read the script. However, among the king's advisers, there was one who knew Hebrew, and he said, "Your Majesty, that is the script of Jews." And he began to read, "Dear King, remember our friendship and do not forget the good I did you when you came to my den in the woods. I could have torn you to shreds, for I overpowered you 3 times. You certainly deserved it, but nevertheless I spared your life. In the end, you became king. Know then that I have a wife in that town," and he mentioned the name of the town, "and she put a spell on me. If I don't get the wishing ring back very soon, I'll have to remain a wolf for the rest of my days. But if I can get back the wishing ring, I can become a human being again like everyone else. Therefore, I beg of you, recall my loyalty to you. Ride to that town, take the ring from my wife, and bring it back to me for the sake of our friendship. Otherwise, I will kill you." There was also a sign showing what the ring looked like, and all this was clearly written in the snow. Now, I find this interesting that I'm reading about this wishing ring, because earlier I was thinking about a lovely ring. It was just made out of stainless steel or aluminium, some cheap metal. But it came to me about a month before I had my near-death experience, before I had the gallbladder surgery. And it came to me, I bought it for $12 in a second-hand shop. And it was a lovely ring, and I bought it because it was a talisman of a sort. It had, on the front, it had the eye, the evil eye, a protective device to chase away the evil eye. But it was sort of done in the shape, it could almost be confused for a rising sun, the way the jeweler had designed it. And then on the back of the ring, around the back of it, it had like cross hatches, and in between each cross hatch was an M, an A, a G, an I, and a C. So on the back of the ring band, it said magic. And then on the inside of the ring, it said sacred space, which is what I named my home and land where I reside here. And next to the word sacred space, there was 111, which is the angel numbers. And next to that, stamped the symbol of yin and yang in the Chinese spiritual tradition. So I was so overcome with surprise and delight at this talisman that I bought it. And by the way, $12 was quite expensive for a ring that wasn't even sterling silver. It was just made out of some cheap metal. However, I bought it because I recognized the potency of all the little, pardon me, symbols on the ring. And I wore it. I wore it for about a year. So even after that surgery, but I knew it was brought into my life as a kind of a talisman or amulet or protective device. And then after about a year, I lost it somewhere walking around the block with Charlie and Beauregard. I must have lost a little bit of weight, or it was loose that day and it slipped off my finger, and I was never able to find it again. And it's funny, I was thinking sometime during reading one of these earlier stories, it was coming to me about that ring, and I was like, yes, it's a shame I never found it again and that I was never able to copy it exactly. One day I might be able to, because I can now cast in sterling silver, but the problem would be engraving the word sacred space and copying the word magic on it, and copying the exact shape of the eye looking like a sun, and the yin and yang which was stamped into it, so that whoever had made it had created a yin yang stamp for it. And I was thinking about that, and you know what, in a way it was kind of a wishing ring. It didn't bring me wealth or true love, but it gave me the extra power, the mana, the strength to survive that dreadful surgery and fight the entire hospital team about their evil, malfeasant pre-admission practices that were awful, sexually harassing and foul beyond words, and gave me the extra strength, which took a full 2 years, by the way, to recover from that surgery. So here we are reading about a wishing ring that brings great wealth to its owner and perhaps breaks the curse of him being a werewolf, am I right? So it's funny that that's been on my mind today. Oh, I did make this ring to try and have a similar energy to it. Oh, my bones, my old lady bones. I didn't dance last night. Now I feel sore. So I made the spoon ring out of a very plain spoon handle, and I tried to engrave. I don't have gravers, so I have to buy some because I had to do it with ball burrs, and it's a bit messy and not exactly all that tidy writing, but I engraved magic into it with the 111 for the angel number, similar to my original ring that I bought in the second-hand shop. And I had to go over the lines on the spoon handle here again because they got kind of faded out from all the buffing and polishing I did. And but anyway, I'll wear it in good health, my darlings, because magic happens, and the gods and the Jews, the Jew and the gods, the magical Jewish shaman witch in me decrees I wear my kind of a protective device too, with the intention of making something similar to that ring that literally came into my life in a rather unusual way. I was down in Byron Bay with my daughter Crystal and my friend Jared and our two little doggies, and we were walking around, and we just stopped into this second-hand shop, which meant Jared had to wait outside with the dogs while I went in, and we took turns. And yeah, I came across that ring and I had to buy it. I knew it was important. My whole soul kind of, emanated. I must buy this. It's important, and it's too wondrous and shamanistic for me to not buy it. So yeah, I'm a bit unusual and eccentric like that, people of Earth. But anyway, where were we about the wishing ring? Upon hearing this, because it was all written clearly in the snow, upon hearing this, the king said, "I want to help him even if I have to risk my life." With no further ado, he started out with 3 servants and rode until he came to the town where the rabbi had said that the wife lived. Here he announced that he wanted to buy lovely rings and old-fashioned jewellery. Nothing was too expensive for him. He would pay the full price. He also summoned the Jews of the town and asked them whether they had any old-fashioned gold or rings, or perhaps even gems. The Jews said to him, "We are poor people, but there is a woman here in town who owns a lot of beautiful jewellery and many gold rings." He asked them to take him to the woman. They did so, but they didn't realise that this was the king himself. They took him for an ordinary merchant who dealt in gold and all kinds of precious stones. Upon coming into the woman's home, the king said to her, "Listen, my good woman, I've been told that you own old rare objects and old golden rings, some with and some without jewels, but with lovely old-fashioned work. If I see something I like, I'll pay you a good price." He took out some lovely rings from his pouch and told her he had bought them en route. The woman said, "I will be pleased to show the Lord my old gold." She went into her chamber and took out quite a number of precious objects. The king had never seen anything so beautiful in all his life. He was astounded at finding a Jew with such lovely things. But then, all at once, he caught sight of a string of rings, and among them was the gold ring that the wolf had described. The king thought to himself, "How can I get the ring?" He took hold of the rings and said to himself, "If only my wolf had the ring he desires." And to the woman he said, "How much would you charge for such rings?" But he didn't point to the magic ring. The woman said, "So and so many 100 ducats." My good king came to terms with her 2 rings, and he stole the wishing ring. But the woman didn't even notice. He paid, took his leave, and went home. By the time he came home, the woman realised that the wishing ring was gone. But what could she do? She didn't even know who the merchant was. She was as miserable and grief-stricken as a widow, and no one could console her. When the king arrived home, he gave a great banquet and invited all the lords of the realm. As he sat at the table, merry and joyous, he sent for the wolf. Coming in, the wolf was so overjoyed that he wagged his tail flatteringly. for he knew the king had gone out to get the ring. The wolf kissed the king and caressed the king. When the king saw this, he took the ring from his bag and showed it to the wolf. If the king had known about the true power of the ring, he might not have given it away so readily. But now he took the ring and put it on the wolf's paw, and a naked man stood before them. When the king saw him, he quickly threw an expensive cape over him to cover his nakedness. The lords of the realm were terrified. The king said, "Don't be afraid. The man standing before you was the werewolf." Now the man leapt up in great joy and said to the king, "Dear king, I beg you, give me permission to go home again, for I haven't been there for 3 or 4 years. Do me the great favour and let me go." The king said, "My dear friend, if you wish to go, you may do so. But if you prefer to remain with me, you can live here and eat at my table for the rest of your life. I'll never be able to repay the good things you did for me." And so the rabbi took leave of the king and went home. The king wanted to give him many presents, but the rabbi said, "Your Majesty, you have seen for yourself that I have money enough at home. Therefore, I don't need your money. You've done me a big enough favour by getting me the ring. Without it, I would have had to remain a werewolf all my life." Of course, if the king had known the secret of the ring, he would not have been so quick to return it. Even though the king had no dearth of beautiful objects, he still did not possess such a prize as the ring, whose value was beyond estimate. And so the rabbi took some food for the journey and started out. On the way, he once again gathered 50 students and bought them clothes of black velvet, and they came to his town. But before he even set foot there, he said, "I wish to God that my wife, damn her soul, would turn into a donkey. Let her stand in the stable and eat from the trough with the other beasts." Meanwhile, the news had spread through the town that the rabbi was arriving with 50 students, all dressed in velvet, just my favourite fabric of all. The whole community gave the rabbi a hearty welcome. They wanted to know where he had been for so long, but the rabbi said, "It would be better if you didn't ask. I won't tell you where I've been." The rabbi acted as if he didn't know what had happened to his wife, although he fully realized she was in the stable. Nevertheless, upon coming home, he did ask his servants, "Where is my wife? I don't see her anywhere. She won't be able to look at the 50 students I've brought back with me." His servants said, "Dear Rabbi, please don't be frightened, and we'll tell you the whole truth." The rabbi said, "I won't be frightened." So they began. "Dear Rabbi, as soon as we heard that you were coming, we ran to tell your wife the wonderful news, but we couldn't find her anywhere, and we don't even know what's become of her." The rabbi wasn't the least bit frightened, and he continued to affect ignorance. He said, "I think that if she stays away as long as I did, she'll still come back in the end." Meanwhile, the rabbi started acting as he had always acted. He distributed alms to the poor, kept up a yeshiva, did good deeds and kind actions. Everyone rejoiced. A short time later, he gave a large banquet and invited the entire town. Sitting there in high spirits, he said, "Friends, since the good Lord helped me to come home safe and sound, I swore an oath to build a beautiful house of worship. The bricks we need for the construction will be hauled by the donkey." This donkey was his wife, but the others didn't know he had transformed her. They said, "Dear Rabbi, may the good Lord help you and enable you to carry out your wish in peace and health." Meanwhile, the donkey had been eating a lot and gotten fat, and in front of people she had no sense of modesty. She coupled openly, like all animals. Like Charlie shitting on this book, am I right? Oh dear goddess. But when the rabbi made her haul bricks on her back, she became very scraggy. The rabbi saw that she didn't want to move, so he kicked her in the ribs and said, "You wicked shrew, what ordeals you inflicted on me, the devil take you." And the rabbi made the donkey work until she grew very, very scraggy. This took a long time, and no one wondered where his wife had gone. As soon as the synagogue was built, the rabbi gave another great banquet, inviting all his wife's kith and kin. When they were all tipsy, the rabbi told them the entire story, everything that had happened to him, the terrible troubles his wife had caused him, until the good Lord had helped him and he had recovered his human form. "That's why I turned her into a donkey, and that's what she'll remain for the rest of her days." When her kith and kin heard this, they were terrified and felt pity for her. They pleaded with the rabbi to forgive her, assuring him she would never do it again. But the rabbi wouldn't trust her. Not long after that, the rabbi passed away, leaving his children a vast wealth. But the wishing ring had vanished, and his wife remained a donkey as long as she lived. That is why King Solomon said that one should never entrust a secret to one's wife. For if the rabbi had not told his wife the secret of the wishing ring, he would have been spared his ordeal and not have had to run about in the woods. But in the end, he paid her back what she deserved. For, as it is written in the book of Psalms, he made a pit and dug it, and he has fallen into the pit that he made. And thus concludes today's readings from the great works of Jewish fantasy. It's been real, it's been lovely. There's even been my usual channelings and visitations and a few interesting epiphanies along the way, and it's the life of the Tanya, and blessed be the Holy One, the true judge, who lets me kind of run amok in freedom and wildness like any ordinary werewolf woman, but I'm not there yet. I'm not an actual werewolf yet. Could happen one day. Depends on my mood, am I right? So we mustn't joke about that. Transmogrification of the soul is a real thing, by the way. It's called atavism. So we won't be doing that. But, it started raining. I was thinking about going out to Aldi and picking up something nice to have for lunch and or dinner. Guess I could still do that. What's stopping me? I'm a free and wild autonomous woman, am I not? So I may. It's very cold here now. Very cold the last 2 days. So it's been an interesting time. Just spied an ibis landing on my neighbour's roof. So anyway, Goddess, gods of your understanding, bless you all, people of earth. You've had a nice Jewish time of it with me, but we've also had African American folklore and other folklore. Can't remember what the other one. Oh, Aboriginal folklore, the Dreamtime. So we've had a lovely time of it, and I'll have to come back later with today's readings of even date as well. Maybe after I've rested a bit and had something nice to eat. So, bye for now, my darling ones. Remember, as always, honour thy ancestors, remember thine gods, and maintain the wild. Keep your own languages and your own stories. Much love to you all. Bye for now.